James and I have spent our whole lives living simply and steadily. We were never that wealthy, but we were never in debt either. He used to work in maintenance department for the city, and I spent over 20 years as an administrative assistant at the local elementary school. 2 ordinary paychecks, nothing fancy, but surely enough to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. Now that we're both retired, life's quieter. We live in an old house out in the suburbs. Between our 2 pensions, we bring in just over $5,000 a month. The mortgage has long been paid off. Our days are easy. Grocery runs, home-cooked meals, tending the yard, weekend visits with old friends. Nothing extravagant but peaceful all the same. Sometimes James plants roses in the backyard. I'll be in the kitchen brewing coffee by the window. When I look up and catch a glimpse of those soft blooms swaying in the light, it feels like a reflection of our life now. Quiet but not without its tenderness. The only thing that still keeps us up at night is our son Joe. He's 33 now, has a stable job, and he's a good kid, reliable, grounded. It's just that when it comes to love, nothing's ever really stuck. James and I have never pushed him, not out loud anyway, but the hope's always there. We'd like to see him bring home someone solid. Someone he could build a life with. Someone who could ease our hearts as we grow older. That evening he came home early from work. The look on his face, half bashful, half thrilled, gave him away before he even spoke. Like he had good news he could barely keep to himself. "Mom, Dad," he said, slipping off his shoes with the kind of grin that made him look 5 years old again. "I have a girlfriend. She's coming by tonight. I want you to meet her." Her name was Tessa. James and I exchanged a glance, and without a word we both smiled. We knew this was a first. Joe had never brought anyone home before. Not once. I hurried into the kitchen and added a couple more dishes to dinner. James went digging through the cabinets and found our special coffee mugs. The ones we only ever use at Christmas. He polished them until they shone like mirrors. When the doorbell rang, my hands were still wet, but my heart had already jumped ahead of me. Joe stood at the door, and next to him was a girl who looked just right. Tall and slender, with chestnut hair loosely pinned back, and a powder blue coat that made her look like she'd stepped out of some early spring morning. Her eyes curved when she smiled, dimples softening her face. She held a few neatly wrapped gift bags, and when she said, "Mr. Dawson, Mrs. Dawson, it's so lovely to meet you," her voice was as bright and clear as the mockingbird that sings outside our kitchen window in April. During dinner she was as thoughtful as could be. Helped me clear the dishes without being asked. Refilled James's cup when it got low. She spoke just enough, and always with a smile. She was warm, polite, easy to like. At one point I gave James a little nudge under the table, my quiet way of saying, "Look at that. Our boy finally picked a good one." And honestly, that's what I believed in that moment. Tessa seemed sweet. She seemed considerate. The kind of girl you'd be lucky to find. Only later did we learn, sweet and considerate can still come with a price. After a few rounds of wine, the conversation started to loosen up. She began by asking where we used to work and how retirement was treating us. I told her that together, James and I pull in just over $5,000 a month in pension. The house is fully paid off and life's been pretty comfortable. That's when I caught it, that flicker in her eyes. He covered it well, but I noticed. She smiled and said, "Wow, sounds like you two are doing better than most of my friends who are still working." Then in the same breezy tone she asked, "So is this house fully yours? Joe mentioned he's an only child. Have you ever thought about maybe passing it on to him for when he settles down?" At the time I just thought she was making small talk. I smiled and said yes, the house was ours. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, just right for the 2 of us. I added that we'd been thinking about helping Joe with the place when the time came, but we hadn't made any decisions yet. Looking back, that wasn't idle chit-chat. That was reconnaissance. Every word of hers was a feeler, gentle as a breeze, but aimed with precision. After dinner she left with Joe. I stood at the dining table, unwrapping the gift she'd brought. The packaging was lovely, no doubt about it. But inside? Just a bunch of trinkets. Pretty but useless. And right then something shifted in me. A quiet little ripple beneath the surface, like a pebble tossed into still water. Small but unsettling. From that night on, Tessa became a regular in our home. Weekends mostly. She never came empty-handed. Sometimes it was a box of cookies, sometimes a bag of imported fruit, once even a bottle of pretty decent wine. She always seemed to pick just the thing I'd mentioned in passing. "Mrs. Dawson, this is the brand of cookies you said you liked last time. I had to go to 3 different stores to find them." "Mr. Dawson, I heard this wine has a lovely finish. You should give it a try." She smiled sweetly, spoke politely. At first I was genuinely touched. She seemed thoughtful, considerate, like she truly wanted to be part of our family. She was especially warm toward me. When we went grocery shopping, she'd hook her arm through mine. At the corner coffee shop, she'd give me a shoulder massage and coo, "Are your shoulders a little stiff lately, Mrs. Dawson? You've got to take care of yourself. You're not getting any younger." Her tone was more tender than my own daughter's. But over time something didn't sit right. Her affection always seemed tied to money. Gifts, favors, little comments that were just a bit too pointed. Like the time we passed a storefront with a wool coat in the window. Over $500 easily. She sighed and said, "That color would look stunning on you, Mrs. Dawson. After Joe and I get married, I'm buying you that coat." Or when a neighbor pulled into their driveway with a brand new car, she glanced over and said, "Joe's coworker is so lucky. His mom gave him a brand new SUV for his birthday. Isn't that the sweetest?" She loved sharing stories about other people's weddings. "My cousin just got married. The groom's family bought them a townhome downtown, paid in full. They even threw in a brand new Audi SUV. My college roommate married into good money. Her mother-in-law gave her custom jewelry for a welcome gift, and they held the wedding at a beachside estate." She'd say it all with a cheerful voice and a sunny smile, but her eyes, those eyes, held an unmistakable kind of longing. Not envy, not admiration. Expectation. She wasn't just reminiscing. She was planting seeds. Dropping hints. Laying out a blueprint. Like she was saying, "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Dawson, please review these examples before submitting your final answer." James and I started whispering about it in private. One evening, he lit a cigarette and leaned against the kitchen doorway, brow furrowed deep. "That girl talks too smooth. Like she knows what you're about to say before you say it." I handed him a cup of tea and lowered my voice. "She's sweet, sure, but I can't shake the feeling she's not trying to get close, she's trying to get in." That unease I felt, it started to grow like the ivy in the back corner of our yard. Quiet at first, then creeping, curling, wrapping tighter with every visit. And it didn't take long before something happened that proved we weren't just imagining things. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind where sunlight spills across the living room floor like warm honey. Tessa and Joe were curled up on the sofa, and we were all chatting about maybe taking a weekend drive somewhere scenic. The mood was light, easy, just another cozy family moment. Then she stopped mid-sentence, gently swirling her coffee. The clink of metal against porcelain rang out, bright and sharp. She looked at us with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mr. and Mrs. Dawson," she began, "Joe and I have been together for a while now. Have you two thought about when we might be getting married?" James and I exchanged a glance. Of course this was good news. We both nodded, showing our support. But what she said next sent a quiet chill down my spine. "We've been talking about it," she said lightly. "And after we're married we definitely can't live with you. Young couples need their own space." That made perfect sense. We'd never expected them to move in with us. I was just about to say we'd be happy to help them look for a place when she steered the conversation in a very specific direction. "I've had my eye on the Stonebridge condominiums downtown," she said, smiling again. "They're fairly new, have a full-time security team, and the schools nearby are top-rated. It'd be perfect for when we have kids." As soon as she said Stonebridge, something in my chest tightened. That area was one of the most expensive in the city. Prime real estate with a price tag to match. Forget buying outright. Even covering a down payment would be a stretch for us. Joe seemed just as caught off guard. He hesitated, then murmured, "Tessa, that place might be a little outside our budget." Her smile vanished like a light switch flipped off. She jerked her arm away from his and turned to him, her voice sharp. "Outside the budget? So what, Joe? You expect me to squeeze into your parents' house after we get married? Is that the plan? Have you ever actually thought about giving me a proper home? Or am I just someone to fit around your life when it's convenient?" Her eyes brimmed with tears, her tone dripping with wounded pride. She looked like someone who'd just been betrayed. Joe opened his mouth, desperate to explain, but no words came out. I jumped in, trying to smooth things over. "Tessa, sweetheart, it's not that we wouldn't help you. Stonebridge is lovely, sure, but those prices are something else. If you look a little farther out, like over in Elm Grove, the homes are newer, the neighborhoods are safe, and the schools are still great." "I'm not interested," she cut in, her voice calm but edged with steel. I won't consider anywhere else. All my coworkers got places downtown from their husbands' families when they got married. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't slam her mug or throw a fit. But the way she said, "I'm not," sharp, final, almost clinical, hit harder than any shouting ever could. It felt like the sunlight itself dimmed. I looked at Joe sitting there silent, staring at the floor like a scolded child. Then I looked at Tessa, her expression unbothered, firm, as if everything she'd said was not only reasonable but overdue. And for the first time, a doubt I'd never dared to entertain crept into my heart. This wasn't a couple working out the kinks before marriage. This was a dress rehearsal for a financial negotiation. I used to believe that talking money kills romance. Now I'm starting to think, if you don't talk money, she might already have your bank account security questions memorized. Ever since that conversation about the condo, Tessa's visits didn't let up. But something in the air had shifted. She still smiled, still brought little gifts, but the warmth felt curated, rehearsed. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, she began steering our conversations in a new direction, toward her parents. She started sharing stories about her upbringing in vivid, emotional detail. "My parents really had it rough," she'd say, eyes misting up. "Especially my dad. He started working in an auto shop when he was 18. His hands are covered in calluses. He never fixed his own teeth just to pay for my schooling. And my mom's been sick most of her life, on medication in and out of hospitals. My dad had to be both father and mother, and he never once complained." She told these stories with a catch in her voice, dabbing the corners of her eyes with a tissue, and honestly, James and I were moved. We weren't strangers to hardship ourselves, and hearing how deeply she respected her parents struck a chord. But over time I started noticing a pattern. Her devotion to her parents, while admirable, wasn't just about gratitude. It began to feel like she was preparing us. Not asking us for help directly, but planting the idea that supporting her family was going to be part of our future too. Every tale of struggle ended the same way. "Joe and I will make sure they're taken care of. They've suffered enough." It was subtle, but the implication was there. She wasn't just sharing, she was recruiting partners in her cause. The moment that really shook me came on James's birthday. Joe brought her over for dinner. We'd prepared a full spread, roast, sides, even a homemade cake. The atmosphere was warm, relaxed. Midway through the meal, Tessa raised her glass and smiled sweetly. "Mr. Dawson, Mrs. Dawson," she said, "happy birthday. Wishing you health and happiness. You've both worked so hard and your retirement income is so generous. Hopefully when it makes sense you might be able to help Joe and me get our little household started. And maybe even lend a hand with my parents too. They've done so much for me, I just can't leave them behind." She said it like a joke. Her voice was light, her expression soft. But her eyes were watching us closely. James chuckled faintly, lifting his wine glass, but I saw it pause just a split second midair. Joe stared down at his plate, silent. He knew what she said wasn't right but didn't have the guts to say so. Inside I felt a jolt, like someone had knocked my heart off its rhythm. It's a beautiful thing when a child wants to care for their parents. But expecting your future in-laws to foot the bill, and wrapping it in sugar like it's no big deal? That's not devotion. That's emotional extortion. I bit my tongue. It was James's birthday and I didn't want to ruin the night. But my heart, it dropped like a stone. Back when she insisted on a downtown condo, I thought she had expensive taste. But now I was starting to see something else. This wasn't about taste. It was about strategy. And sure enough, just a few days later they came over again. Dinner ended and Tessa lounged on the couch, sipping tea. She pulled out her phone and let out a dramatic sigh. "Ugh, commuting is killing me. The office is so far and with the subway and bus it's just too much. And I've got to look presentable for morning meetings. Makeup, hair. It's exhausting." Trying to make small talk, I nodded. "Yeah, the commute can be rough." He jumped on that. "Exactly. That's why I told Joe, we'll need a second car once we're married. Something roomy, maybe a crossover. It'll make work easier, weekend trips more fun, and when we have kids, it'll be perfect for school pickups." It all sounded reasonable enough. Practical even. I asked, "So have you looked at any? Got a budget in mind?" Joe opened his mouth, but Tessa cut in before he could speak. "I actually found one I love. A Land Rover SUV. Not too expensive. Comes out to around $50,000 after taxes and fees. It's super safe for a woman to drive, and the space would make a huge difference in our daily lives. James and I locked eyes, and I knew he was thinking the same thing I was. Is this really about function, or about flaunting? I was just about to probe further when she dropped the real kicker. With a sugary smile, she looked straight at us. The car might be something we'd need a little help with. You know, my parents don't have much saved and I'm just starting my career. But if you two helped cover it as a wedding gift, it would really show how much you support us. Support us? I laughed silently and bitterly inside my head. That wasn't a gift she was suggesting. That was a price tag, with our names penciled in at the bottom. She wanted the most expensive neighborhood. She wanted a car worth 50 grand. And now she wanted us to help support her parents too? Tessa's words were sweet. Her voice gentle. She called us Mr. and Mrs. Dawson with practiced charm. But when she looked at us, all I saw was someone scanning our net worth. She wasn't trying to join a family. She was trying to buy out our financial freedom, with our own checkbook. I glanced at Joe. He was staring down at the floor, his face caught in a blur of confusion and quiet frustration, like he was trapped between two impossible definitions, what it meant to love someone and what it meant to be responsible for them. That was the moment I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. The wedding hadn't even happened yet, and she was already angling to tie our retirement income to her lifestyle. She wanted us to fund their future, cover her parents' old age and wrap it all up in ribbons like it was a generous little family plan. This wasn't building a marriage. It was securing a long-term financial sponsor, with bonus benefits. That night I sat alone in our bedroom curled into the armchair by the window. I didn't even turn on the light. I just stared into the darkness, feeling its weight settle around me. I knew what I had to do. It was time to talk to my son. That weekend I asked him to come into the study. I closed the door behind us. No distractions. No polite detours. Just the kind of honest conversation that leaves no room for pretending. The light in the study was soft, warm. I poured him a cup of his favorite coffee, the hazelnut roast he used to drink in college. He smiled faintly as I handed it to him. I kept my voice steady. Joe, I've noticed you've seemed worn out lately. Planning a wedding's no small thing. It's a lot of pressure, huh? He sighed and leaned back in the chair, pressing his fingers to his temples. Yeah. Tessa's got a lot of expectations. I didn't sugarcoat it. It's not just expectations. They're unreasonable. She wants a condo downtown. A $50,000 SUV. And she expects us to pay for it all. I met his eyes, my tone calm but unshakable. Joe, it's not that we're unwilling to help. If you'd found someone who truly wanted to build a life with you, someone who loved you for you, we'd be happy to give you wedding gifts, help where we can. But what she's asking for, it's not just more than we can afford. It's more than we should be giving. I paused, then said clearly, every word deliberate. I don't think she loves you. I think she loves the life you, and your father and I, can give her. Especially our retirement savings. His expression changed instantly. He snapped his head up, eyes suddenly guarded and hurt. Mom, how can you say that about her? He said, his voice tight. Tessa's not like that. She just wants to feel secure. Her family didn't have much. Wanting a better life shouldn't make her a bad person. I took a breath, but it caught on something sharp inside me. She's allowed to want a good life, Joe. But the way she's going about it, it's wrong. Has she ever stopped to think about your stress? About the life your father and I have worked so hard to build? She keeps using other people's weddings as some kind of benchmark. Demanding houses, cars, support for her parents. She's not planning a future with you, she's writing up an invoice. He opened his mouth to defend her again. She's blunt, sure. But she's been good to me. And to you guys. I cut him off. She's nice to us because she wants us to say yes. I pointed to the stack of bills and the calculator on the coffee table. Think about it. Hasn't she always been fishing to find out how much we have saved? Doesn't every conversation somehow end with a reminder of how hard her parents worked, how much she wants to give back? Joe, I know you love her. I get it. But love doesn't mean turning off your common sense. He dropped his gaze again, falling silent. I could see it in his shoulders, the way they slumped under the weight of what he didn't want to admit. He was torn, caught between what he hoped was true and what he was beginning to fear might be real. My voice softened. I reached out, laid my hand on his. I'm not asking you to make a decision tonight. I'm just asking you to open your eyes. Really see her. Ask yourself, Does she love you, the person, or is she in love with everything you come with? And when it comes to your father and me, is she grateful for us, or just calculating what we're worth? His fingers tightened slightly around the coffee cup. He didn't speak, but I could tell, somewhere deep inside something had shifted. That conversation didn't change anything overnight. Joe finished his coffee in silence. He didn't defend her again, but I could still see where his heart leaned. There was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes when he looked at me, like he was caught between what he felt and what he was starting to suspect. And maybe, just maybe, he was afraid to look too closely. I knew better than to push. You can't talk someone out of love. Not when they're still in it. They have to see it themselves, live it, feel the cracks forming under their own feet. That's the only way they ever truly wake up. That night James and I talked it through again. He sat quietly under the soft glow of the living room lamp, listening to every word. When I was done, he didn't say anything at first, just stared at the clock on the wall, its second hand ticking steadily through the silence. Then he crushed out his cigarette with a sharp motion and said quietly, "She can't be allowed to push us like this. I'll find a time to talk to Joe myself." I don't know what exactly was said between father and son. They had their conversation behind closed doors and neither of them ever gave details. But I could feel the shift. Joe grew quieter, more withdrawn. At dinner, he'd pick at his food, eyes distant, jaw clenched like there was something he wanted to say but couldn't bring himself to. I knew the seeds had been planted. The words I said that day and whatever James added later, had settled somewhere inside him. They hadn't bloomed yet, but they were there. Waiting. Growing. Tessa must have felt it too. She didn't pull back. In fact, she doubled down. And not long after, she played her biggest card yet. She brought her parents into it. She told Joe that it was time. Time for both sets of parents to meet. To formally discuss the wedding plans. As soon as Joe mentioned it, something in my chest went tight. This wasn't just a dinner to talk flowers and venues. I could feel it. This was going to be a negotiation, not a celebration. A sit-down to draw lines, lay out expectations, and maybe, just maybe, settle accounts. Because when someone like Tessa says, "Let's talk about the wedding," what she really means is, "Let's talk about what your family's willing to pay." And I had the sinking feeling that whatever she had planned for this family meeting was going to make her wish list crystal clear. The meeting was set at a family-style restaurant on the outskirts of town. Quiet, casual, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and framed photos of old farmhouses on the walls. We'd reserved a booth tucked in the back, hoping for a calm setting where we could talk things through like adults. It was a beautiful afternoon, the kind where sunlight spills in through the windows just right. But I couldn't shake the weight in my chest. There was a heaviness to it all, a quiet pressure sitting right over my heart. James and I arrived early. We sat in silence, sipping iced water, occasionally exchanging glances across the table, knowing full well this wasn't going to be a friendly get-to-know-you. This was a negotiation, plain and simple. And we weren't just meeting her parents. We were about to be sized up. Joe walked in holding Tessa's hand, followed by her parents. Her mother was dressed in a deep purple dress, too bright and a size too small, her hair teased into a voluminous cloud. She smiled warmly, but her eyes were sharp, scanning everything, calculating. Her father trailed a step behind, quiet, hunched in a faded windbreaker, fiddling with an unlit cigarette between his fingers. He nodded once in greeting, barely meeting our eyes. We sat down. The server came by, brought menus and water. Barely a few pleasantries had passed when Tessa's mother jumped right in, voice bright and cheerful, but with an edge that was anything but casual. "Oh, Tessa has always been such a good girl," she gushed. "Smart, hardworking, never gave us a moment's trouble. She's doing great at work. Her boss loves her. Honestly, she's had no shortage of suitors over the years, but she only had eyes for Joe. That's fate, isn't it?" James and I managed polite smiles, nodding along, but the tone was clear. This wasn't flattery, it was the prelude to an invoice. Sure enough, her voice shifted, softened with sudden nostalgia. "We don't come from much. I work the register at a grocery store, on my feet 12 hours a day. Her father used to work in a warehouse, moving heavy shipments until his back gave out. We scrimped and saved to get Tessa through college. She never lacked a thing." She dabbed at the corner of her eye with a tissue, but I didn't see any tears. "All we want," she continued, "is for her life to get easier now. She's worked so hard. She deserves to breathe a little, to have an easier future." She said easier twice. It sounded like a blessing, but it landed like a billing statement. That's when her husband spoke up, coughing a few times before chiming in at just the right moment. We're not asking for much, he said. Don't need anything fancy. We just want them to be stable, you know? I've had a lot of health issues these past few years. And while we're not getting any younger, retirement planning is becoming more of a priority. He said it casually, even lightly, but every word hit like a slow-burning fuse. When he said retirement planning, he wasn't talking to his wife. He was looking straight at Joe. It couldn't have been more obvious if he'd drawn it on a whiteboard. You'll be responsible for us too. James and I sat across from them, still smiling, still playing the part. But inside, I was boiling. Because this wasn't a family dinner, it was a presentation. A transaction. And we were the assumed investors. Tessa, meanwhile, played the part to perfection, refilling her mother's water, passing her father extra servings with a gentle hand on his shoulder. She looked like the picture of filial grace. But I saw it, the little smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. The one she tried to hide but couldn't quite suppress. It wasn't warmth. It was certainty. Like she believed the deal was already done. That meal was a blur. The food was good, plenty of it, but I barely touched my plate. Everything tasted like dust. As soon as we pulled out of the parking lot, Tessa went off. What was that? She snapped, twisting in her seat to glare at Joe. Your parents didn't say a single clear thing the whole time. My mom poured her heart out and they just sat there smiling like statues. What's that supposed to mean? Do they think they're too good for us? Joe, flustered, tried to calm her. Tessa, come on, it's not like that. My parents just don't want to spend any money, right? She cut in, her voice rising, sharp as a knife. They won't buy a place downtown, they keep delaying the car, and now they can't even acknowledge my parents' retirement? Joe, are you serious about marrying me or not? The air inside the car turned thick. And in that moment it was no longer about a condo or a car or who paid for what. It was about control. And Joe, poor Joe, he looked like a man standing in the middle of a storm trying to convince himself it was just a passing breeze. After that dinner, Tessa's emotional pressure campaign kicked into overdrive. Day by day, more intense, more relentless. She began feeding Joe a steady stream of guilt-laced values, wrapping her demands in the language of duty and devotion. Taking care of my parents is our responsibility, she told him. They worked their whole lives, they sacrificed everything for me. You're going to be like a son to them now. You can't turn your back on family. It didn't stop there. She started naming numbers. I've been thinking, she said one evening, all calm calculation behind a soft smile. $3,000 a month for my parents is fair. Groceries, medicine, bills, it all adds up. And with prices climbing every year, we can always adjust later. Joe didn't say much when she first said it. But something shifted in him after that. His mood dimmed. The light that used to live behind his eyes, the easy grin, the spark in his voice, was flickering out. Now he walked around with a permanent furrow between his brows. At meals he barely spoke, pushing his food around his plate like he didn't even taste it. And when he looked at James and me, it was always with hesitation, like he was holding something back. We saw it happening. Saw our son, the same boy who used to light up every room, being dragged deeper and deeper into emotional quicksand, slowly suffocating under someone else's definition of love and obligation. It broke my heart. This wasn't just a woman with expectations. This was manipulation. Piece by piece she was reshaping him, redefining love as sacrifice, convincing him that caring meant paying and paying meant proving himself. And I knew we couldn't just sit and watch anymore. Some lessons you can't teach with words. Some truths have to be seen to be believed. It was time to find the truth. Lay it bare. Let Joe see for himself. Was Tessa really building a future with him, or was she simply securing a future from him? I didn't want to tear them apart. But I wasn't about to let my son become someone else's open wallet, smiling through a lifetime of quiet regret. So I made up my mind. I was going to get proof, not for me, not for James, for Joe. So that when the truth finally knocked, he'd have no choice but to open the door. Sometimes the truth doesn't arrive with a bang. It tiptoes in on an ordinary afternoon, tucked inside the quiet moments you'd least expect. It was a calm Saturday, the kind with birdsong and sun filtering gently through the curtains. Joe had stepped out briefly to pick up some documents from the bank. Tessa stayed behind, curled up on the couch watching TV. I was out on the balcony tending to my roses when I heard her voice, low, cautious, like she didn't want to be overheard. But the balcony door was open. And the living room wasn't far. She was on the phone with her mother. I froze, watering can still in hand, and instinctively reached for my phone, quietly tapping the record button. Her tone was slick with satisfaction, laced with just enough irritation to feel real. "Mom, stop rushing me. Everything's moving along," she said, loud enough for me to catch. "I already looked into their finances. His parents pull in several grand a month from their pensions. House is fully paid off. No debt. Joe. You know how he is, soft-hearted, easy to handle. I just need to pout a little and he folds." She gave a soft laugh. "The house and the car are coming along. I'll get him to bring it up with his parents in his own time. And you and Dad, stop worrying. We'll get it sorted. Living arrangements, retirement funds. We'll plan all of that too. Just let me work it." Then her tone shifted. "Crap. His mom's on the balcony. I'll call you back." The moment she hung up, the TV blared with a fast food commercial, drowning out the room in artificial noise. But her words still rang clear in my ears, sharp as broken glass. The sun kept shining, but I felt nothing. My hands were cold, my breath caught somewhere beneath my ribs. She wasn't here to build a life with my son. She was here to manage one, to manage us. Every detail choreographed, every word calculated. I stood there for what felt like forever, watching water overflow from the flower pot until the soil turned dark and heavy. Then slowly I returned inside. I smiled at her. Asked if she wanted tea. Like nothing had happened. Because it wasn't time, not yet. I needed something more. Not just words he might dismiss as, "You misheard," or "You misunderstood." I needed something he couldn't look away from. Something undeniable. And as if on cue, she gave it to me. Over the next few days she ramped everything up. She started dragging Joe to more open houses in high-end downtown developments, making test drive appointments at luxury car dealerships. Every time they came back, she'd gush about smart home features and buttery leather seats, about child-friendly communities, and advanced climate control systems, as if laying out the blueprint for a life we were expected to co-finance. Then came the final act. One evening she arrived with a file folder in hand and a businesslike air. She sat in the center of the sofa, legs crossed, expression serene, and placed the folder carefully on the coffee table like she was about to present a boardroom strategy. "Mr. and Mrs. Dawson, Joe," she began, her voice composed, her face glowing with practiced poise. "This isn't a demand. It's just a set of suggestions. Some early-stage planning to avoid miscommunications or financial pressure down the line." I felt my stomach drop. James's brow furrowed so sharply I thought it might never smooth out again. The first page, housing plan. She proposed we assist with the down payment for a condo in a new luxury development downtown. "We'll take out the mortgage jointly under both our names," she explained. "But early support from you would really ease the burden. It's just more secure when the title includes both of us." Page 2, vehicle acquisition. She recommended purchasing a new SUV before the wedding, specifically in her name. "It'll help with the financing since I can get an employee discount through my company's insurance partner. Saves money overall," she smiled. I nearly laughed but didn't. Page 3, monthly household budget. "Joe's salary will be allocated 80% to a shared account which I'll manage. I track expenses really closely, so I think this will make our spending more efficient." Then came page 4, parental support proposal. "My parents don't have retirement benefits," she wrote. "Their employment was always irregular, so we've agreed to offer them a living stipend of around $1,000 per month. Joe and I will share the cost, but any assistance from you would mean a lot." And finally, a section labeled additional considerations. "Given future expenses like childcare, healthcare, and education, we suggest you consider establishing a family trust, or potentially updating beneficiary designations, just as a gesture of long-term support and shared security." Each sentence was polite. The tone was warm. But the substance? Coldly transactional. Every line mapped to a dollar sign. I closed the folder with hands gone slick with sweat. This wasn't a financial plan. This was a takeover strategy. A carefully veiled contract to convert affection into funding, in-laws into sponsors, and marriage into merger. I looked up. Joe's face was ashen. He was staring at the pages like they might catch fire in his hands. His fingers dug into the folder's edge, knuckles turning white as if he didn't know whether to tear it apart or throw it across the room. The room fell into a silence so deep, even the TV couldn't break it. A reality show chirped on in the background, voices laughing, cheering, celebrating shallow triumphs, while our own house sat in a frozen, breathless pause. And I knew, this was it. The curtain had finally lifted. The final act had begun. And it was time to see whether my son would choose love, or wake up to the cost of it. That night the air in the living room felt like it had frozen solid. Joe stared down at Tessa's post-marriage financial and lifestyle proposal, his face locked in a mixture of shock and disbelief. His fingers still gripped the edge of the paper, knuckles white as if releasing it might make the whole thing feel real. But no words came. Tessa, on the other hand, didn't look the least bit flustered. She let out a soft laugh, light, almost affectionate, and said, "Joe, don't let the structure scare you. I know this kind of thing might feel a little intense, especially for your parents, but it's not about demands. It's just responsible communication, so everyone knows what to expect." Then she turned to me, her voice smooth, her posture graceful, her smile delicately measured. "Mrs. Dawson, I have nothing but respect for you and your husband. I put this together not to start a conflict but to avoid one. It's not about money, it's about peace of mind." On the surface, it all sounded so reasonable. Her tone was composed. Her makeup flawless. Her expression sincere. To a stranger she would have looked like the picture of maturity and good intentions. Joe looked from her to me, his lips parting. "Mom," he said, voice low and hesitant, "I know this doesn't feel great. But Tessa's a good person. She really is. She's a little too direct sometimes, that's all." I didn't respond. I just looked at him, my son, with a stillness that felt like stone. The fire inside me, once a slow burn, was now ashes. Cold, heavy and quiet. James sat nearby, brows furrowed, silent. Joe pressed on. "We just want a stable life. So, I know you and Dad are worried, but I need you to trust me on this. I want to be with her. I need you to support me." Support. That word landed like a pin to the chest. Support. Like we hadn't been doing exactly that every single day of his life. From his first cries in the night, to the fevers that kept us up until dawn. From rewriting college essays after every rejection, to sitting outside his office during his first heartbreak, waiting in the cold just to hand him a cup of coffee and remind him he wasn't alone. We gave him our days, our nights, our bones, our breath. And now all of it boiled down to, "You don't support me." I picked up the folder, closed it gently and slid it back across the table toward him. My voice was calm. Too calm. "Joe, if that's what you've decided, then go ahead. Try it. You want to marry her, we won't stop you. But from this point on, you'll need to learn how to take responsibility for your choices." He froze, eyes wide. He hadn't expected that. Maybe he'd expected another argument. Maybe tears. But not this. He opened his mouth as if to respond, but no words came. I stood, gathered the teacups from the table and walked toward the kitchen. My voice when I spoke again was flat. Final. "You don't need to stay for dinner. We didn't plan for guests. And we're not in the mood to host." Tessa's expression faltered. Just for a second. Still, she stood up and slipped her arm through Joe's. "Let's go," she said. The door closed behind them with a muted click. And then it was just James and me sitting in the silence they left behind. I slowly sank back onto the couch, gripping the handle of my tea mug so tightly the veins in my hands stood out. James took the cup from me and set it aside, then gently laid a hand on my shoulder. "Don't let it eat you up," he said. "Sometimes, letting them hit the wall is the only way they learn." I nodded. But I didn't speak. Not that night. Not the next morning either. After that evening I didn't call Joe. I didn't send a message. I didn't ask where he was or what he was thinking. I didn't mention his name at the dinner table. It was like closing a window in the middle of a storm. Let the wind howl out there for a while. Let him stand in it and feel what it's like to finally see who was holding the umbrella all along. After that night the house grew quieter than ever. James still spent his mornings trimming branches out in the backyard. I kept busy cooking, cleaning, folding laundry, but we never brought up Joe. We never mentioned Tessa. It was like the warmth had been swept out of the rooms, replaced by a fine layer of invisible dust. Without saying it out loud, we reached a silent agreement. No interference, no compromise. Joe texted from time to time, short messages like, "How are you?" or "Hope your back's better." I answered with slow one-word replies, "Fine." "Okay." No follow-ups, no questions. I didn't ask how he was doing. I didn't ask if he'd changed his mind. No fights, no drama, just a quiet, steady pulling away. He stopped by once or twice, picking up some things he'd left behind. Like he was trying to hold on to something without naming it. I heated up a bowl of soup for him but didn't say much. He stayed only a short while. He didn't mention Tessa. Not even once. But I could see the storm behind his eyes. He was unraveling, caught between the loyalty he wanted to give and the truth he didn't want to face. And I wasn't idle. That phone call I overheard from the balcony, I had recorded it. Quietly, cleanly. I didn't confront her. I didn't send it to Joe. I just waited. But then something else found its way to me. One evening, while scrolling on social media, a nearby post popped up in my feed. Something about a luxury development in the heart of downtown. I clicked on it out of curiosity. The photo showed Tessa standing in a sleek model unit, dressed in a tailored suit, holding a coffee cup with a smug smile. Her caption read, "Who says you need a silver spoon to live well? I never play to lose." I tapped into her page. It wasn't her public profile. It was a private one, clearly meant for close friends, not family. Not Joe. The comments made my stomach turn. "Another sugar daddy, huh? Damn, which poor guy paid for this view? You need to teach us how to get a man to sign over his wallet like that." And Tessa's reply? "Light work. Flatter them right, wrap it up tight." My hands were trembling. Later, I reached out to an old friend from the community clinic where I used to work. Her daughter was interning at Tessa's office. What she told me sealed it. "Tessa talks like your son is some stepping stone," she said. "She tells people she wants to lock down the wedding fast so she can get access to the money. She even asked around about family trusts, said she wanted to start planning her in-laws' estate strategy. She'd never mentioned any of this to Joe. But when it came to our home, our pension, our life savings, she wasn't the least bit shy. I collected it all. Screenshots, recordings, statements, and saved them onto a USB drive. I didn't rush to show him. I waited. Waited for him to be ready. Waited for the words, "I see it now." But those words never came. Until one evening I realized, I couldn't wait anymore. I invited him over for dinner. He showed up with a frozen pizza in a crinkled grocery bag. Didn't even bother peeling off the plastic. Clearly bought it on the way more out of guilt than thought. I didn't scold him. Just told him to sit. Heated up a bowl of corn chowder instead, his childhood favorite. He took a sip then murmured, "Still the best. No one makes it like you." I nodded. "You used to ask for it every time you had a cold." We sat there for a moment, quiet. Then I stood and walked to the drawer. Pulled out a small wooden box. Inside was the USB drive. And a few photos. Joe as a boy wheezing from asthma, James carrying him on his back to the ER, me sitting in a hospital hallway bleary-eyed, wrapped in a jacket I hadn't taken off in 2 days. I pressed play on the speaker. Tessa's voice filled the living room. "Don't worry, I already looked into their pensions. Joe's easy to handle. House and car won't be a problem, and yeah, we've got their retirement all worked out." Her tone was smug. Calculating. Confident. I switched off the recording. Then slid the box toward him. "I'm not here to fight you, Joe," I said quietly. "I just need you to see. To know who's actually standing in your corner." He didn't speak. His eyes darted to the photos, then the USB. His jaw tensed. His lips pressed into a hard line. And he couldn't meet my gaze. I stood and walked toward the kitchen. "When you've figured it out," I said without turning back, "come home for dinner." He didn't stay. He lingered by the doorway for a long time. Then finally he left, quietly shutting the door behind him. But I knew deep down the seed was planted. It was there now, buried in the soil of his doubt, waiting. Waiting to be watered with silence. With absence. With the cold realization that love, real love, doesn't come with invoices or itemized expectations. That family isn't built on marble countertops and downtown views. It's built in late-night fevers and hospital benches. It's held up not by money, but by heart. Another quiet Saturday afternoon. The house was still, the kind of stillness that lingers after too many unspoken words. I had just taken a tray of warm cookies out of the oven when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Joe standing there, backlit by the soft spring light, a tired look in his eyes and a grocery bag in hand. Fruit, milk, some slices of ham. "I was in the area," he said quietly. "Thought I'd stop by." I didn't ask why. Didn't need to. I just nodded and stepped aside. "There's some cantaloupe your dad sliced this morning. Go grab a few pieces." He stepped inside, moving slowly, like someone visiting a place they once knew by heart but now saw with unfamiliar eyes. His gaze drifted across the living room. The bookshelf still held his high school math trophies. The same picture frame stood next to the sofa. The three of us camping in the national park, him on my shoulders holding a leaf like a prize. I went to the kitchen to make tea. Through the window I saw him standing in front of the old cherry tree in the backyard. Spring had only just begun to wake it, tiny buds reaching for light, shy and uncertain. "Mom." His voice came quietly, almost hesitant. "That time my asthma was really bad. You're the one who ran me to the ER, right?" I paused, then nodded, my hands stilling over the tea tray. "Yes. Your dad was out of town. No taxis would stop, so I wrapped you in a blanket and ran the whole way. I remember I was still in slippers. My feet were bleeding by the time we got there." He didn't look back at me. He just kept watching the tree, his voice barely above a whisper. "I remember not being able to breathe. I remember panicking, and your hand on my chest, pressing, telling me to hold on. I think I buried it after a while, but it's still there. I just forgot how much you did." I didn't say anything. Just poured the tea and set the pot on the table. Eventually he turned and sat on the couch. He dropped his head into his hands. "Mom," he said, muffled by his palms, "have I been selfish?" I sat down beside him slowly. Instead of answering, I reached into the drawer and pulled out an old photo album. I opened it and handed it to him. There he was, 6 years old, wearing oversized overalls and grinning like the world had just told him he could keep it. There he was, covered in flour in the kitchen, his first attempt at baking. There we were, 3 of us on the couch after his college exams, eating pizza and watching dumb comedies until we cried laughing. I placed the album gently in his lap. "Joe," I said softly, "we never expected anything in return. But you have to ask yourself, does the person next to you love you? Or does she love what your father and I spent our whole lives building?" He didn't answer. Just stared at the photos, his thumb brushing the edge of a memory that had grown soft with time. "Mom," he began again, voice raw, "I really did love her. At the start I thought she was just scared. I thought if I worked harder, gave more, she'd finally feel safe." I nodded slowly. "But she didn't, Joe. She just kept taking. And you started disappearing." His shoulders dropped. His hands tightened around the edges of the album. His eyes, red now, blinked hard but no tears fell. He didn't stay for dinner. Just said he needed some time to think. I didn't try to stop him. As he stood at the door, I simply said, "The tree in the backyard? It's still there. If you ever figure it out, just know it's been waiting." He nodded once, then left quietly. Later I washed the teacups and wiped down the counters. James was outside pruning branches, the sun falling through the curtains onto the wood floor in soft, golden slats. We didn't speak. But we didn't need to. As I knew. That boy who once called our names in the middle of the night, who once needed us to carry him when he couldn't breathe. He was finally starting to find his way back. Time had reached that breaking point. I knew if I waited any longer, Joe would stay trapped in the tug-of-war between emotion and reason, slowly bleeding out under the weight of his own denial. And Tessa? Her appetite would only grow. Quietly, relentlessly, until there was nothing left of him to give. I needed a clean break. A moment of reckoning so sharp, so undeniable that even Joe couldn't look away. A confrontation that didn't leave room for excuses or blurred lines. So I called in an old friend. Lindsay, the daughter of my former coworker Kathy, had just graduated from law school and was interning at a private trust and estate consulting firm. I sat with her over coffee and explained everything, carefully, calmly. No drama, just the truth. After listening, Lindsay agreed to help me set a trap. She would pose as an external financial advisor, supposedly contracted by Joe's company to offer premarital estate planning services. Under the guise of a future joint asset consultation, she'd invite Tessa for an initial interview. And Tessa took the bait. We arranged for them to meet at a quiet corner table in a downtown cafe. Lindsay had prepared a subtle recording setup and a carefully crafted list of questions designed to let Tessa walk herself right into the truth. "Let's talk a bit about post-marriage finances," Lindsay began. "Do you have any expectations around asset management?" Tessa kept her usual polished demeanor, smiling lightly. "Well, I'm pretty good with numbers. I'll probably handle most of the budgeting and monthly expenses, though Joe and I would obviously make major decisions together." Lindsay nodded, then gently pushed forward. "And what role would you envision his parents playing in your financial life as a couple?" Tessa paused for just a beat before giving a casual laugh. "Them? Ideally, they'd help with the down payment on a house. Maybe chip in for a car too. Later on, I assume they'd contribute to a future child's education fund or something. It's only fair." Then came the real test. Lindsay asked lightly, "Would you consider their money part of your shared future assets?" This time Tessa's tone relaxed even more, almost giddy. "Let's be honest," she said. "People like them, if you handle them right, they don't hold back. I already told Joe it'd be smart to move their house, car, even any inheritance into our names early. Just in case anything happens, we don't want loose ends." She took a sip of her coffee and added with a chuckle, "Honestly, I'm kind of in a rush. His mom. Always playing sweet, but she's sharp. I need to move before she makes any decisions I can't undo." When Lindsay sent me the audio file, I sat at the kitchen table half reading emails, half trying to keep the bile in my throat from rising. "Every suspicion we'd ever had, every hunch, every gut whisper," she confirmed. Boldly. Proudly. She never saw Joe as a partner. She saw him as a pathway. She never wanted to join our family. He wanted to conquer it. Not with love, not with patience, but with strategy and speed. I didn't show the recording to Joe right away. I waited. Because this moment, this kind of truth, only works when someone is ready to face it. Turns out I didn't have to wait long. A few days later he called. His voice was quieter than usual. Slower. You could hear the waves churning beneath it. "Mom," he said, "can I come over? I think we need to talk." I told him yes. No questions asked. After dinner I led him to the living room and played the recording. Nothing more. No setup. Just the sound of his fiancée, smiling, sipping coffee and unraveling everything we had feared. As the words filled the air, I watched the blood drain from his face. His jaw clenched. His hands, resting on his knees, tightened into fists until his knuckles turned pale. "Tessa," he whispered, voice cracking, "she really said all that?" "She did," I replied, calm and even. "And you came this close to handing her your future. Our family's legacy. Every ounce of trust your father and I spent decades building." His eyes welled, but he fought to keep them from falling. "I messed up, Mom," he said softly. I was so desperate to prove I could handle love, that I didn't see it wasn't love at all. I thought if I just gave more she'd feel safe. But all I did was lose myself. I didn't twist the knife. I didn't scold him or say I told you so. I just reached out and rested a hand on his shoulder. Firm, warm. Because sometimes, the only thing heavier than a broken heart is the weight of finally seeing someone for who they really are. The next day Joe made a decision. He ended it. He looked Tessa in the eye and said with a voice steady as stone, "You're not worthy of everything my mother has done for me." She tried everything. Tears, pleading, promises. She cried about misunderstanding, claimed she never meant harm, begged him to remember the good times. But he didn't flinch. Not once. Then her parents stepped in. Gone was the polite, smiling couple from the restaurant. They called Joe directly, no pretense this time. Their tone was sharp, accusatory. "You have no sense of responsibility," her father snapped. "You made a promise," her mother added, voice thick with implied threat. "Young couples fight, it's normal. But what really hurts is when you let the older generation down." They tried shame. Tried pressure. Tried guilt. But Joe didn't bend. For the first time he didn't offer excuses. He didn't try to make it easier for anyone. He simply ended the call and blocked their numbers without hesitation. The boy who once second-guessed every decision, who shrank himself to keep others comfortable, was gone. In his place stood a man who had seen the truth and chosen to stand in it. Later that evening he came home. Not to pick up things. Not to keep the peace. To be home. He walked into the living room and pulled out the old photo album. The one he hadn't dared to look at in years. He sat on the couch and turned its pages slowly over and over again. Not rushing. Not crying. Just remembering. Pictures of scraped knees and crooked grins. Birthday cakes lopsided with love. Camping trips and late-night pizza. Tiny moments that built a life. Finally he looked up, his eyes soft but clear. "Mom," he said, "I just want to be myself again." After the breakup, Joe went quiet for a while. He didn't move back home right away, didn't call or text too often either. But I could feel it. Somewhere beneath the silence his spirit was mending. Like the earth after a storm. Still muddy, still raw, but hiding seeds that were already beginning to push toward the light. Then one Saturday morning he showed up at the door, arms full with a large cardboard box, and a look on his face I hadn't seen in a long time. A kind of ease that only comes when something heavy has finally been put down. "Mom," he said, "I packed up a few things. Thought I'd bring them home." I nodded and took the box from him. It was heavier than it looked. Inside were more than just clothes. There was his old college guitar with the worn fretboard, a dog-eared book scribbled through with notes, and a dented stainless steel water bottle that had clearly traveled with him through more than one chapter of his life. "I almost forgot I had these," he said, running his fingers along the guitar case. "But turns out, these were the only things I didn't want to leave behind." I didn't say much. Just pulled out the water bottle, washed it clean, filled it with warm water and handed it back to him. "So," I asked gently, "where do you want to go from here?" He looked at me, eyes clear. "I want to find work I actually believe in," he said. "I quit the finance job. I'm applying for a role as a community program coordinator. It doesn't pay much, but it feels right." Something shifted in me then. I thought back to when he was in high school, volunteering at the community center, walking dogs for elderly neighbors, tutoring kids at the library just because it made him smile. He was always that boy, bright, kind, endlessly curious. And now he was finding his way back to him. Over the next few weeks, Joe became a familiar face around town again. He helped the local church organize food donations, built portable shelters for the homeless, even started a weekend little book day for kids to swap used storybooks. Sometimes I'd spot him from afar, unloading boxes from an old van, his shirt soaked through with sweat but always smiling. He looked different, not just lighter but freer. The tightness in his shoulders had eased, the weariness around his eyes had faded. He wasn't rushing anymore. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He was just present. And every weekend he came home for dinner. Not out of obligation but because he wanted to. He'd sit at the kitchen table, ask about my back, about his dad's garden. Sometimes he'd bring little surprises. Rosehip jam because he remembered I loved it. A fresh bag of whole bean coffee for James. Even the sewing machine he'd quietly repaired when he saw it wasn't working. One evening, as we passed plates around the table, James chuckled and said, "You used to inhale your food in 10 minutes flat. Now you're out here battling your mom for stove time." Joe laughed. "Back then I didn't get it. Now I know. Nothing tastes better than home." He didn't talk about Tessa anymore. At most, a quiet, "I'm glad you didn't give in." I knew the wound was still there. But I also saw how he was stitching it closed, not with regret, but with purpose. One afternoon I watched him in the backyard, balancing on a step stool, replacing the light bulb over the porch. I handed him the wrench, and as he reached for it he said without looking down, "Mom, you probably should have let me crash into that wall a long time ago." I smiled, shaking my head. "I just didn't want you to crash so hard you couldn't climb back out." He climbed down, tightened the bulb one last time and looked me in the eye. "Good thing," he said quietly, "you were always behind me." And in that moment, under the soft spring light, I realized something. He had found his way not just back home but back to himself. The second autumn came quietly, like a familiar friend slipping in through the open windows. That afternoon Joe came home with someone new. Her name was Lena. She wore thin-framed glasses and a warm, quiet smile. Her voice was soft, steady. She was a registered nurse at a nearby care facility. They'd met at a charity drive, helping the church prepare Thanksgiving dinner for the community. Joe told me later it started with canned goods. She was lugging 3 overloaded grocery bags up the church steps, out of breath and determined not to drop a single can. Joe spotted her from across the lot and rushed over to help. He took 2 of the bags without asking, and she smiled at him like it was the first time someone had shown up without being asked. She didn't just have a kind heart, she had a grounded one. That night as we worked side by side in the kitchen preparing dinner, I saw it firsthand. At one point we got to talking about family, swapping small stories as we chopped vegetables and stirred pots. I asked offhand if her parents were still working. She nodded. They're getting close to retirement. I've been saving a little here and there just in case they ever need help down the line. But my dad keeps telling me not to worry yet. He says the last thing he wants is for me to put my life on hold for them. She laughed as she said it, not bitterly, not dramatically, just with a kind of matter-of-fact tenderness. As if she'd grown up in a home where love meant not turning someone's care into a burden. In that moment I realized, real kindness doesn't show up with a speech or a scorecard. It lives quietly in how a person carries responsibility, and never once expects you to pay them back for it. Later that evening she helped me bake cookies in our kitchen. She stirred the dough while telling me, "Joe always brags that your cookies are the best in the world." I thought he was exaggerating, but I was wrong. They're better than the ones I grew up on. I laughed, shaking my head. He used to say that as a kid too. But he'd only ever eat two, then hide the rest in his desk drawer so no one else could get to them. James joined us talking sports. Lena didn't fake interest. She listened, asked thoughtful questions, even tossed in a few baseball terms that made James raise his eyebrows and grin. After dinner she quietly helped me clear the table, wiped down the counters, sorted leftovers into containers like she'd known the layout of our kitchen her whole life. She didn't wait to be asked. She just did. And before she left she turned to me, sincerity blooming in her eyes. "I know you've been through a lot," she said gently, "but I'm not here to fill a gap. I just really like him, who he is. Him. Not his history, not his future, not the version of him someone could mold into something else. Him." That word landed soft as a feather and solid as truth. I stood in the doorway as they left, watching their silhouettes disappear into the evening. He walked just ahead, but she wasn't far behind. The breeze stirred the wind chime on the porch, and the sound it made was delicate and familiar, like a lullaby I hadn't heard since the years when Joe still fit in my arms. Later that night, after Joe had dropped Lena off, he returned. He didn't say much. Just sat quietly in the backyard under the old trellis, where the ivy had started to curl into itself for the season. I brewed 2 cups of tea and brought them out, handing him one without a word. He took a sip, held it in his hands, then spoke. "Mom," he said softly, voice lower than usual, "thank you for not giving up on me." I didn't look at him. Just watched the steam rise from my mug and replied gently, "I was never afraid of you making a wrong turn. I was only afraid you'd never stop long enough to look back." He was quiet for a moment, then turned toward me. "I used to think you were the obstacle," he said, eyes searching mine, "like you were holding me back from growing up. But now I know, you were the one thing I could always count on to catch me when I fell." We sat there for a long time, not speaking, letting the wind hum its quiet song through the vines above us. And in the stillness of that autumn night, with tea cooling in our hands and forgiveness blooming in the silence, I realized something. My son had come home once before. But this time he had truly returned. The days passed, one by one, folding into each other like warm, familiar laundry. And slowly the house returned to how it once was. I went back to tending my roses in the mornings, snipping away the dead heads, coaxing new blooms from the soil. James had his routine again. Every Thursday afternoon, off to the church to volunteer. Joe came by often, not out of guilt or obligation but simply because he wanted to. He'd clear the leaves from the backyard, check the wiring in the kitchen, change out the air filters before we even noticed they needed it. Sometimes Lena came too, carrying a tin of something homemade. Cinnamon rolls, cornbread, lemon squares still warm from her oven. She moved through our kitchen like she'd been born into its rhythm, never asking where things were, just knowing. We didn't talk about the past anymore. Not directly. But every now and then, as we sat around the dinner table carving roast chicken or passing the sweet potatoes, James would sigh and say with a grin, "Our boy finally figured it out, didn't he?" And I'd nod, quietly grateful that some lessons, no matter how painful, do eventually lead home. Joe was still working in community outreach. It didn't make him rich. But he was steady. And present. He never missed a single family holiday. He didn't bring us luxury gifts or boast about job titles. He came home with supermarket steaks on sale and a bottle of red wine with a crooked label but a surprisingly smooth finish. One Sunday afternoon I asked him a question I hadn't asked in a long time. Are you happy now? He paused, then smiled, not the kind of smile that tries to prove something but the kind that sinks in deep. Yeah, he said. I am. Not the kind of happy that looks good from the outside. Not the flashy kind. But the kind I can afford. The kind I can carry without pretending. The kind that always leads me back here. I felt something soften in me, like the way a rose opens under the right kind of sun. Because that was it, wasn't it? This whole life, all the detours, the heartbreak, the noise and ache of growing, was just a long journey toward one simple thing. Finding a place where you don't have to perform. A place where you're not afraid to lose. A place that won't collapse when you do. That place doesn't have to be grand. Or new. Or perfect. It just has to be strong enough to hold your mess. Soft enough to forgive your mistakes. Steady enough to tell you, you can begin again. And that place. It's called home. It's called mom.